Welcome to all tuning in today, and a special thank you to Massachusetts Restaurant Association, Educational Foundation, and Massachusetts ProStart for also joining us today. We're certainly in for a treat with today's presentation, ACF ChefsForum Seafood Identification and Skills. Now, more than ever, it's important for chefs and culinarians to connect, to share, and to offer inspiration and mentorship, which is exactly why we're excited to be here today, just for you, the leaders and future leaders of the food service industry. I'm Jackie Pressinger, Director of Strategic Partnerships at American Culinary Federation, the largest association of chefs in North America, and I'm excited to be your moderator today. Before we begin, as a note, we're excited to take your questions. Please let us know what you would like to ask Chef in the Q&A area. And to collaborate with other viewers, you can also use the chat feature. So let's test out that chat. Let us know what your favorite seafood dish is. I'm originally from the Boston area, so I have to say that I'm wicked excited to introduce a colleague, a very talented chef who I admire very, very much. Chef Americo DiFronzo is an ACF certified executive chef, certified culinary administrator, and is the chair of the American Academy of Chefs. With over 4 decades of industry experience, Chef DiFronzo is the executive chef of the Union Oyster House in Boston, a landmark restaurant and America's oldest continually operating restaurant since 1826. The Union Oyster House has earned so many awards, including North America's Best Landmark Restaurant, as well as an ACF Achievement of Excellence Award. It has been named one of the 10 classic restaurants in the world you must visit by Forbes magazine, and so many more accolades. So Chef, this is very, very exciting. We are so thrilled to have you here with us today, live from Boston. And at this time, I'll turn the presentation over to Chef DiFronzo. Thank you, Chef.
Jackie, thank you very much. You made me sound like I really know what I'm doing. Thank you. The gentleman here, this is Chef Anton Christian. He's our chef de partie. He's also a master shucker of shellfish. He's been a champion of basically competitions, and he's opened millions of oysters and clams in his career. He also at one time was the chef here at the restaurant, and then he segued into the front of the house when he realized that shucking was part of what he wanted to get into. So I have him here to help me today, as well as we're going to do a little oyster opening as well. So I'm going to have him work through that. He's much quicker at it and smoother than I am. So I basically brought him in to give me a hand as well. So first off, I'd like to say thank everyone for coming. I know there's a lot of students on there. I know there's quite a few from Massachusetts. I know that the Blue Hill Culinary Group is out there. I want to say hi to them. Chef, basically, Anthony Giuffre is a great friend of mine, and he told me last night he has a whole bunch of students watching today, so thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started right away. We were waiting on one delivery, which Anton's going to help me with for one of the demo items I want to show. So tell you a little bit about the restaurant. Jackie, could you go ahead and show a couple quick video slides? So we have a couple slides of the restaurant here. And they are going to maybe buffer a little bit, but basically give you an idea what the restaurant looks inside for those that haven't seen it. The first picture you saw was the outside of the restaurant. This is one of the 9 dining rooms that are in the restaurant. We have over 550 seats and basically made up of 5 small buildings. And we are 195 years old this year. And what you'll see is basically, this is what the restaurant looks like when we're full. Now, this is pre-COVID, so you don't see any masks in the dining room. But the idea was to really show you what the restaurant looks like when it's up and running. This room here that we just went through is actually called the Pine Room. And we're going downstairs. That was up on the 2nd floor. And now we're going downstairs. And we're going to basically end at the Oyster Bar, which has been around since 1826. It's the original piece of furniture that customers have been sitting at and enjoying oysters. And so this is it here in the foreground. And then the next one after this, I believe we'll end up inside the Union Bar, which is, okay, Jackie, there you go. I'm not sure where you're going to go next to see. So, okay, so here we are coming, if you go right to the next one, Jackie, after this one.
That is
All right, so here we are. This is the Union Bar. So what basically what it is this is seats about 80 people down here, and there are 3 dining rooms downstairs. So it just kind of gives you an overview of how the restaurant kind of looks like an antique. But the kitchen is not antique. We have pretty much a lot of modern equipment. Since I've been here for 8 years, we've upgraded three of the five areas. We've also upgraded most of the kitchens. All right. So today we're going to start with basically clam chowder. If we could hold this slide for a minute, now, Jackie. So what we want to do is basically review clam chowder. So if we could use this, Anton, and kind of, so what Anton has is we're going to have a little handheld camera here. We're going to kind of zoom in a little bit. So clam chowder is the mainstay of the restaurant. We serve over 10,000 gallons of clam chowder per year. So what we did was we have over here some induction cookers, and I have a piece of salt pork in here, which basically starts out white like this. And this salt pork basically has been browned. So Anton, you want to show how it's been browned up? We're going to discard that because we want the liquid that's in the pan. So inside the pan here, we have this liquid that's really salty, because salt pork basically is the belly of the pig that's been brined with some salt. So once we get that, that's really one of the secret flavors. We're going to add some butter, whole butter. We're going to let that melt down, and then we're just going to saute some onions and celery. And so while we're talking, we're going to continue to move along with the clam chowders. This is one of the items that we're going to be doing. So Anton's going to keep an eye on that so we don't burn the butter. But as soon as that butter just melts, we'll add in the onions and the celery and saute it down until onions get translucent. And then we'll come back to it. We'll make a roux, and we'll continue with the ingredients. As you know, there's 3 types of roux. So we'll be making basically a white roux, which means we're only going to cook it just for a couple minutes, just to cook out some of the starch. And then we'll build the stock with all the ingredients we have here. This recipe here really hasn't changed. And I'll tell you, I recently found out the first restaurant in Massachusetts and the United States to serve clam chowder was the Union Oyster House. It was served in 1836. And how I know that is because we just did a TV piece for Chronicle, which is a local news show. And they actually came back and gave us that piece of research, which we hadn't known. I knew that we had it in 1850, but I didn't know now it's moved down to 1836. So it's a pretty interesting piece. How's our butter? Excellent. All right, here you go. So we're going to add our onions and our celery. And then Anton's going to keep an eye on this so that we don't burn it while I'm talking, because I tend to talk a lot. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was round fish. So could you bring up the next slide, please? All right, so here we have basically seafood shellfish. You can see this is a huge variety. New England, we're very blessed in New England to have the ability to be on the coast and have our access to all this different shellfish. We do bring in quite a bit from local farms, but we also basically do buy wild product as well. So Jackie, next one, if you wouldn't mind, please. So we have round fish, and the classic round fish is basically a fish that has eyes on both sides of its head, and basically comes with 2 fillets. We can fillet the fish and end up with 2 pieces. So the mainstay of Massachusetts is the cod fish. And that's why we have a piece of the state named Cape Cod, which is named after the fish. And if you notice the fish, the skin we have here, we have a nice piece of cod with beautiful kind of a gray-black speckled skin, nice white fillet. And then we have a piece of haddock, which is the fish below it. Again, nice white fillet. Skin you can see is a little bit different. And if I flip them over side by side, you'll be able to see the difference. The main difference between the 2 of these fish is that cod tends to be bigger. The haddock seems to be a little sweeter in taste. Price-wise, cod is less expensive by about $2 a pound. And also I have a nice fillet of salmon in here, which I'll talk about salmon just for a minute or two. But I got a nice fillet of salmon. We buy a Canadian farm-raised salmon. We buy it skin on with the nape on, which is here. And we have the pin bones removed because it's a lot more efficient for them to do it than us. So these are the 3 mainstay fish of the Union Oyster House. We also use other fish, but these 3 are staples every day at the restaurant. Now, if we go to the next slide, I don't have many here today, flatfish. So the difference between the two species is the flatfish has their eyes on top of their head. So they basically hover very close to the bottom of the ocean. So they can see the predators coming down to attack them by the eyes being on top. You notice the underside of the fish is very white because, again, it's right to the ground. It doesn't need it for cover. The fish itself will get you 4 fillets. In this picture you see there are 2 fillets, but what they'll do is they split those 2 fillets down the middle to create the 4 fillets. We do use sole from time to time here, but it's not on the menu. Then I can bring it in basically just to show you there. If I could see the next slide just for a moment, just to see what's up. Okay, so we'll just leave it here at the moment. What I wanted to do is just touch base on a couple of things that you need to know. So I'll leave these here just for a minute, Chef. How are we doing over here, Chef?
Good,
Okay?
excellent.
Good. Okay, so we're not ready yet for the roux. Before I move to the next section, actually, maybe we should start that roux, Chef, just so we can show them. Yeah. So we're going to add our flour to the roux. All right, want to whisk it in? There you go, shit now. All right. So what we're going to do is get that roux started, just so we can get this moving along, because this takes about an hour to make, and we don't have an hour today. So as soon as that flour is blended in there, just gonna, there you go, Chef, you can move it more. Just gonna gently move it around so that it cooks for about a minute or 2, and then we're gonna add the stock, which we have basically is clam juice here. The clam juice we get from basically cooking off clams. Today I've got raw clams here. These are basically from Hogs, and we'll be touching on those in a little bit. I've got clam juice. I've got half and half diced potatoes. Looks like we're ready, Chef. Really good. So here we go. When I make this, I like to add just some of the liquid until it blends in, and it kind of looks like mashed potatoes. That's what I tell my students at BU when I teach there. You want it to look like it's mashed potatoes, and that way you know you've got all your lumps out before you add all your liquid in. You can address it now, because once it's all in there and you have lumps, we won't be straining this. So now, go. All right, so we're gonna give him all the liquid now. Once he blends this, we'll bring it up to a boil. So talking about the flatfish for another minute or 2, important thing you need to know is we buy this already filleted. You can get this any way you like. You can buy it whole, you can buy fillets, portion cut, skin on, skin off, pin bones in, pin bones out. You can use the small pieces to skin off the soup stocks. We use the smaller pieces for fish and chips. But one thing that we're always looking for when we cut the fish is parasites. Because whitefish, especially cod and sole, are known to have small worms. Let's get this glove on to show you where I'm talking. We tend to find them really in this head section. We also tend to find them with the nape. We buy ours J-cut, which means that the nape has been taken away, whereas here you see the nape is still there. We utilize the nape. So this is called J-cut, which means they take it away, which means some of the parasites are gone. This little spot right here that has skin, sometimes when I run my knife under it to take it off, I'll find a worm here because this is part of the belly. So that's where you'll find the worms located most of the times. It's either here or up in here. So what we'll do is we always butterfly it open to see if there are any there, because we don't want to serve them to the guests. Now, sometimes, again, it happens. Now, the vendor is supposed to take the worms out, and what they do is they have a large table that has a light underneath it. It's a light table, and they basically put the fish down on it. They can actually see the small parasites, and they pull them out with the tweezers. So that's just a little bit on that. So haddock, on the other hand, doesn't have as many parasites in it because it feeds a little higher in the chain. Cod tends to be a bottom feeder, so it picks up more worms, where the haddock's a little higher in the food chain, so it doesn't pick up as many worms. Salmon can also have parasites in it. They're harder to see. They're more of a translucent color. And then we also have things like swordfish, which is also a round fish, and basically tuna. Swordfish's parasites are black, just like basically the color of my watch, and they could be as thick as my thumb. And then tuna that are translucent. So when people talk about sushi, sushi basically is raw fish. So how do you ensure the customer doesn't eat a live worm and get sick? It's because sushi is not actually fresh. It's actually been frozen for up to 7 days at approximately 30 to 31 degrees, which would help then kill the parasite that would be there. So if I just took this piece of salmon right now and just cut it up and served it to you without doing anything to it, and it has a parasite in it, you could get very sick. If anybody's a baseball fan, the Yankees one time went to Japan to play over there to show off, baseball. And they went out for dinner and ate at a sushi restaurant. And unfortunately, one of them received a parasite. And they didn't know why this player was sick for about 3 weeks. So they tested him and found out that the sushi actually was bad. And he had parasites growing in his stomach. So it is something that we as chefs, we really have to pay attention to. So how do I know my fish is fresh? Well, fish should smell like fish, which means it shouldn't smell like bad fish. Like when you walk through a supermarket and you have that aroma that you pick up sometimes from the deli case, that's not what fish is supposed to smell like. Fish smells like the ocean, or smells like nothing. It doesn't really have an aroma. That's how you really know this fillet of fish is fresh. Plus by the color, the texture, the firmness of the fillet, it should spring back. If I had a whole fish, I'd look at its eyes. The eyes should be full and clear. The gills should be bright red. The scales on the fish should be glistening. So these are the things that I would look for if I had my whole fish here. Cooking a piece of fish only takes 6 to 8 minutes, depending on how thick the fish is. That's it. So it's a very quick growing fish. So again, that's pretty much, what we do here with this fish. We pretty much buy this in 25-pound containers. We do quite a bit with it. So it's our staples. There you go. Thank you, Chef. Move that away. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here we have crustaceans. So basically quite a few different items. We serve basically lobsters, shrimp. We'll serve basically crabs once in a while. We'll serve crab meat. But we're going to be talking about just about some of these items here today. Could I have the next slide, please? So lobsters. Interesting thing about lobsters, they do grow quite a bit. To get to a 1-pound lobster, it takes 7 years. On the wall in the Union Oyster House, we happen to have this lobster mounted. According to that little chart that's on there, excuse me, plaque, I should say, it says that that lobster was donated to the restaurant in 1950 and that it weighed 44 pounds. The interesting thing is if you use Google and you check the Guinness World Record of lobsters, you'll find that the largest lobster ever caught, it's on record at the Guinness book, is 44.6 ounces, 44 pounds and 6 ounces, which means that this lobster one time probably was the world record holder. And that lobster was caught in 1977 off the coast of Nova Scotia. There is no photo of it available, but this one here is one of the most popular items that customers come into the restaurant to take a picture of. Here I have some live lobsters, and I want to just talk a little bit about live lobsters for you. So this is a 1.25 pound lobster. It's about 8-9 years old. And the unique thing about lobsters is they're left-handed and right-handed, just like us. So if you look closely here, we got the crushing claw here, the pinching claw here, and opposite crusher, pincher. So they come left and right-handed. If we turn them over and look at the tail, you can see this tail's wide. Let's see if this little guy wants to cooperate. This one here is also wide. So these two are female lobsters, and I can tell by the width of the tail. Also the size of the claws. Female lobsters tend to have a wider tail, smaller claws. These lobsters here are 2 pounds. I have a male and female lobster here to show you the difference of the tail. So if you look closely, you can see the tail is wider here and narrower here. The crushing claw is bigger. Another distinct way you can tell them apart is underside of the lobster. The eggs are stored right here on the lobster, on its underside. But it's very smooth here. Where on the male lobster, he has these little pins that he can thrash his tail and actually cut someone with right under here. As well as he tends to have all these spikes on his claws. I'm not going to show you any more detail on these, the genitalia and stuff. I'm not going to get into that because I have a mixed crowd on here. If it was just older people, I would show a little more detail on them. This claw and a 2-pound lobster is strong enough to actually break my finger. If I took it off and stuck it in there and put a pencil there, we could make them do that, but we're not going to do that with these today. Could you show me the next slide, please? So you'll also find that lobsters aren't just the color you see here. Lobsters come actually multiple colors. The most rare is the white lobster or the albino lobster, which is 1 in 100 million lobsters. And how it doesn't have this same color, it has to do with the fact, basically, it's a protein that's in the lobster that basically grows and changes basically the color of the lobsters. Lobsters could be two-tone, blue, they could be yellow, multiple colors as you see here. They're not just the color you see, and they're not always just red when you cook them. We have had some lobsters here that were almost blue, not quite blue like this picture, but when you do cook them, they do turn to red. And occasionally you'll see that inside here. You can see some of the colors on this particular lobster has a little bit of blue inside his arm there. So just a little identification. Could I have the next slide, please? All right, so let's move off these. Let's bring some mussels in. Thank you, Chef. Now that lobster I showed you from Union Oyster House, by the way, we're not really sure how old it is. We estimate it's about 92 years old. But I'm not, again, we're not really 100% sure on that. So what we're going to do here is the chowder, just to go back to it, take a peek and see how we're doing. It's coming along pretty good. I'll be adding the potatoes in shortly. So mussels is what I wanted to talk to you about. So basically mollusks. So we have basically univalves, snails, conch shells. If you think of a conch shell, it's that shell you see people pick up sometimes. They put to the ear and they can hear the sound of the ocean, they say. So that's basically what a univalve is, one shell. Bivalve meaning two shells. So two shells basically are mussels, hard shell clams. In New England, we call those basically, quahog style shells. And we also have steamers, which are a New England soft shell, oysters and scallops. So those are all the items that we have. So what we're going to do here is cook a little bit of mussels. That's our goal here. So we're going to basically show you mussels up close. So here we have basically mussels. And basically there are two types. We have rope grown, which are these mussels. You can see there's nothing on the outside of these. They're relatively clean. And we have basically wild. Wild mussels, on the other hand, will look a little like these. We'll have barnacles attached to them. They have what we call a beard sticking out of them. And I only got a few of these in just because we don't buy this particular one. And then they tend to be clustered together, like all together like this, holding each other. The little fiber that comes out of them, again, is removable, and we do remove it. You might hold the chef for a second here. And how we do it is we just basically grab onto it, and we just pull down and pull it out. But once we do this, this mussel only will live for maybe an hour or two. So that's why we buy the rope grown. So what happens is with these is they basically have that little beard attached to rope, and they come across and just cut them off, leaving the beard attached to the rope. So for us, it works out really well. So in the pan over here, just real quick, Anton's going to add some garlic butter. Yep, there you go, chef. I'll help you out here. All right. Yep, okay. And then the onions, we don't want to brown the onions, so we're going to start with a cold pan. And as soon as that butter melts, we're going to add some mussels in. I'll show you how quickly these can cook. All right, we just have this one here. Thank you. Okay, there you go.
Hi, Chef, and I know you asked for periodic time updates.
Well, how are we doing on time?
About just under 40 minutes remaining.
Excellent, thank you. So, chef's going to cook those up for a few minutes, and then when they open, we're going to show you what they look like when they're open. Another thing about mussels is they like to open and close on their own. So if this mussel is open, it could be alive. And what we normally do is just tap them or squeeze them. And now if this mussel closes, it's good. If it doesn't close, it's dead and you need to discard. In this case, it's closing really slowly, so this mussel would be good. Other things to look for when you're doing mussels is broken mussels. You don't want to serve this. It could have broke 5 seconds ago, could have broke it 2 hours ago. This is basically something that could get somebody sick. Should a mussel be open and not close, like this one here, it won't close because I already have a few dead ones up. I take it back. This one's good. See, it's closing right there. If it stays open and I cook this, it will actually be closed in the pan, just like that. As long as I cook it, it won't open. Whereas a cooked mussel will open. It's the opposite of what you think. So if you see a mussel's closed in a pan, don't serve it. It means the mussel has actually died and you didn't catch it before you put it in the pan. Chef, you want to add, before the mussels, want to add some, a little bit more liquid? So now over here, we add a little bit of, just a little broth to help them open up a little bit more. And I'm going to add just a touch of wine. And then basically just let them cook for another minute. And we'll basically put those up. We'll get this out of the way. This is for your presentation. Go ahead. So Anton's going to plate those for us in just another minute or so once it comes up. And he's just about ready. Cool. Here's our plate. And we serve probably about 100 pounds in the summertime per day of mussels. They come in 10-pound bags. Let's see here. Chef, while you're doing that, when you're ready to put it up, go ahead. I'm going to bring the next thing over. Big plate. There you go. Oh, I should have had that there. So these mussels are what we serve here. We serve it with a nice toasted garlic bread. And that's really our Union Oyster House mussels. It's a larger amount, but this is just a small sampling of what we want to do. And you can see how nice and plump the mussels are here. And that's a mainstay at the restaurant. Chef, it's time to add the potatoes. All right, so here we're going to add our potatoes to the chowder. We'll pop that whip out. Pull the whip out now. So now we're going to change from the whip, basically using a heat-tempered rubber spatula just to make sure that we don't basically smash up the potatoes. So once the potatoes are almost done, we'll then move into the seasoning and cream and clams. Cool. All right, so let's give it about 5 minutes, and then we're going to add the rest of the ingredients. So the next thing I want to talk about is scallops. So we had basically, can I have those live scallops over there? So we have some ingredients here. We want to show you about scallops is, most restaurants don't bring in scallops like this. So we have scallops like this, and these are live scallops. So if I basically push on that shell and irritate it a little bit, it will close. You know, so you can get a better look at it there. But in the end, what we're all interested in is the abductor muscle, which is right here. There's a small muscle that sits on the side of the abductor muscle right here that I like to take off. There are restaurants that do leave this on, but honestly, I find that little piece ruins this scallop that costs $16 a pound because it tastes like a rubber band when it's cooked. And basically, it's really chewy. And you got this beautiful scallop here, and it basically ends up being very chewy. So these scallops here are basically 10 to 20 count, which means it's 10 to 20 per pound. These are actually fresh scallops, and they are what's called dry seas, which means that they have not had anything done to them. Wet sea scallops are basically scallops that they will add a brine solution to increase the volume of the scallops, and when the prices really go up, they tend to do it because they get more money for them. A simple test that I use is this. I drop a scallop on the plate, and if I tip it like this, and they don't fall out, and that's upside down, it tells you that they have not been altered. It's just one way. If they could seriously still alter them, but this is one little test that I do sometimes when I'm bringing in a new vendor. I take the scallop out, it looks beautiful, I put it in the thing, and I go, that's not a dry sea. And they go, yes, it is. And I say, no, you've done something to them because they fall out of the dish. And then another thing that happens too is when you go to fry these things, if they're wet, scallops, not wet as in damp, but wet, they basically, the filling blows right off of them. So you end up with scallops looking like this coming out of the fryer later. And you're like, well, what happened to the breading? Because they didn't use a heavy breading on it to hold it in. So our game with plan with this is we wanted to show you how to sear some scallops because they aren't that difficult to do, but some people really get nervous about searing scallops. So let's just change slides to the right. I'll choose this side right here because we know it's nice and hot. So Anton's going to basically sear some scallops for me. So we have here some drawn butter. And all we're going to do is lightly season the scallops just with a little bit of pepper on both sides. I've already patted dry these scallops because they tend to basically be damp on their own. Just a little salt and pepper on both sides. You ready, Chef? Got smoke? There you go, Chef. And you put them on the flat side down and then just let them sit. That's it, let them sit. What's going to happen is the scallops stick and they're not ready to be turned over until they release from the pan. So once he gets them where he wants them, they're in the pan. Now he's just going to wait for them. All right. So we'll let him sear those for a minute or so. Let me just, you can see how we're basically doing here. A little more, Chef. Just get a nice little brown color. Then when you're done, we'll pull them out, put them here, and we'll make our sauce. All right. So this is something I haven't done, but in a long time, but I thought I would do it anyway, just for fun. So we got the live scallops here. I just thought I would shuck one for you. So basically, let's see which one's a little more active. We'll go with this one. So we buy them already shucked. We don't do this, like I said, but all you really need is a blunt item that's not going to cut yourself. And you're just going to come down, top shell, and basically just separate the abductor muscle, pull away the top shell. And you can see in here what it looks like. We're only interested in this. We're not interested in the roe, which sits here. And then basically come underneath and separate it. And this is what we're interested in. All right, almost a nice color there. All right. And scallops only take 2 or 3 minutes to cook. So really, we're cooking them about 2 minutes on each side. We're going to take them out of the pan and let them rest for a minute. Going to remove a little bit of the fat. And then we're going to add a little bit of whole butter. Lower that down. Just a little whole butter to make a quick lemon butter sauce. So basically just classic butter, lemon juice, a little bit of garlic. And once my garlic is pretty much perfumed where I can smell it, I'll lower the temperature down and add a little bit more butter. Maybe I'm trying to move that around for a minute. Yeah, a little bit butter. Thank you. There you go. Just want to splutter it in. Thank you. Okay. Oops. Just going to finish it with a little fresh parsley.
Chef, we're at about half an hour.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jackie. And I just put my scallops back in. I told, when we were basically running through this, I told Jackie a story. I want to tell a story about parsley because it's all about mise en place. You know, without all the mise en place here, we couldn't do all these things we're doing right now in a short window of time. So I basically got a job. My first chef's job was basically at a restaurant called Lily's in Faneuil Hall, Quincy Market. And I got it while I was in school. And chef called me up and offered me a job. And eventually I worked my way up to be night chef. And so the opportunity to cook for the owner, he brought in basically some of his friends and he said, oh, I got a new night chef. Let's see what he can do. So I made a dish for him, which was on the menu, with sole meuniere. It's a classic lemon butter sauce. You finish it with a little bit of parsley and basically pan fried the sole. made the butter sauce in the pan, and boom, I sent it out. Well, it looked excellent to me. I didn't taste it before I sent it. And within a minute, it comes back to the kitchen and the owner says something's wrong with it. It's not good. I'm like, what's wrong with it? It was good when I made it, I thought. So I rushed another order. I rushed that order and I put it up. And guess what? It comes back to the kitchen a second time. And I can't understand what's wrong with it. So now I'm getting frantic. Then I realized that one of the ingredients was corrupted. What happened was parsley. I didn't prep it myself. Someone else prepped my parsley and didn't wash it properly. So the sole, was actually very gritty from the little sand that I felt in the parsley when I reached in the second time. So in the end, I almost lost the best job I had because by the time I left that company, I was the corporate executive chef of the restaurant. So, I got a second chance there. But what I learned was, make sure the mise en place is right. Check all your ingredients. It doesn't mean you can't trust someone to do the work, but you need to go behind and check to make sure it's right because every dish is your name on it. In that case, it was on me because I'm the one basically who put the dish out and I should have been checking my parsley. So I talk about parsley all the time. It's one of my stories. So you can see we just kind of put this scallop out really kind of quickly. Just basically very simple, lemon butter sauce, pan-seared scallops, and just came up really quickly. So let me just slide this out of the way. Let's go check on our chowder. I know we're ready to add basically the clams here because you can start to see that it has some thickness to it and some body because we basically brought it up to a boil and we got our potatoes I know are at the right point. So right now we're going to fold in our chopped clams. Okay, there you go. Actually, a couple more left in there. There you go. So now we're just going to simmer this for a couple of minutes just to make sure the clams are cooked. And then while we're doing that, we're going to add just a pinch of salt. We don't want to put too much salt in this because we already started with the salt pork. A little bit of white pepper. I mean, some chefs like white pepper, some will like black pepper. Personally, for the chowder, we use a white pepper because we don't want the black specks. Okay, so we're going to let that cook just another minute or two, and then we're going to work in our cream. And I'm just going to add a little bit of Worcestershire, a couple drops. And we like to add a little Tabasco as well, just a couple drops. Okay. And let me just turn this back up to get it back up to a boil because we just dropped those cold clams in. There we go. All right. If we could have the next slide, please. Just to see where we're at here. Anton, I think you're going to come over here next. So right now we have the oyster bar. Basically, this has been in service since 1826. So many different celebrities have actually sat at this bar, including presidents of the United States, kings of countries. It's been amazing the amount of people that I've actually met since I started working here. And this is a rapid video. It takes about 2 hours to set up this bar. And we have it here done in about 25 seconds. And it was just pretty much just a quick view of what it takes for the guys to come down, get the oysters, clams, the setup. It's just kind of a fun space that we do. And it is one of the most popular seats in the house, along with the John F. Kennedy booth, which happens to be up on the second floor where when John F. Kennedy was a state senator, he dined here every Sunday and I used to eat lobster stew, which is basically just lobster cooked lightly in a little bit of butter, some lobster meat, some basically cream, a little bit of parsley, salt, and pepper. That was it. And he ate that every Sunday when he was here. So what we're going to get ready for some shellfish identification. Can you go to the next slide, please? So basically, these are hard shell clams that we use at the Union Oyster House. Now, if I was in the Midwest, this would be steamers to me. So we have guests come here and we have steamers, which are the soft shell clams. We call them steamer clams at the bottom. They're also the clam that we use for frying clams out here in the winter. We actually shuck that and use that. Those clams today are running almost $300 a bushel, and gallons of frying clams are running over $150 to $190, depending on where they're from. That basically has to do with the COVID. Right now, they should be about $110 a gallon or under. But basically, this year, prices on everything have been absolutely astonishingly high. So what we have over here is I'm going to have Anton. He's got his gloves on. He's got his knife in his hand. And he's going to do a little shucking and talking about some of these things here a little bit with me. So I'm going to change sides with him and let him get in the middle. And all right, Chef, why don't you set yourself up and let me. So what we have here is a little neck clam. And if we could show my phone camera for a moment. Down here, we have them in different sizes. So they really start out really small. So this is basically a little neck, the smallest clam. And they work their way up from a little neck to a count neck to a top neck, cherry stone to a quahog. So they work their way up. And the same thing here with oysters, when we get to them, they work their way up in size as well. So we're just going to talk about clams for a minute or two, and then we'll get into the oysters. So Anton over here is going to basically, I'm going to have him just show you how to shuck clams. So he has here, if you can look real closely, you can see there's a seam. And he's going to lay his knife right in between that seam when he goes to open. Just get the knife in a little bit, move your hand. So you can see how he's got the knife between. All right, go for it, Chef. Finish it right off. There you go. And these are eaten on the raw or basically can be cooked. We do stuffed clams as well, stuffed clams casino. And then basically he's going to go under and cut the adductor muscle on both sides to release the clam so that when someone's eating that, they can just tip it back and eat it with some hot sauce or cocktail sauce or lemon on it, depending on what they'd like to do. Chef, do another one. Now you can show off and do it quick like you normally do. So as I said, Anton's basically been a champion shucker many times in the years, especially at the Boston Seafood Show, which is the world's largest seafood show. So he does that, makes it look so easy. So that's pretty much what we're talking about. Can I get the next slide, please? So here's an example of how big they can get. So this is that same quahog clam you just saw, that little neck that starts out a little teeny clam, and it can get bigger than that. That particular one, Anton shared that picture with me actually, and that's where that one came from. It's kind of a cool picture. How we can tell how old these clams are, they're like the rings on a tree. You can see that picture, there's actually lines on that clam. That's pretty much how they tell how old these things are, by the number of rings on it. The wider the ring, the better the year it was for the clam to eat. All right, and then we're just going to come back to the chowder here real quick. I'm going to add my cream now because it's time to finish this thing up and get it out of your way. So that way we can move on to something else.
And Chef, we're at about 15 minutes.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So the chowder is going to basically just come back up to a quick boil and we're ready to serve. Can I get the next slide, please? So we're just going to move through the slides now here before we get Anton opening some oysters. So next slide. So this gives you an idea that, clams have been around basically for, millions of years. They're fossilized. You can see the penny in the bottom right corner. That particular clam was basically found in Kansas because at one time, Kansas, there was an ocean there. And they can get as big as 6 feet long. Next slide, please. This is the world's oldest creature. And unfortunately, it has passed away because they found out when they shucked it open, how big it was. They also found out that how old it was. It was 7 years old and was caught off the coast of Iceland. And there's still many large clams like this there and old ones as well. Next slide, please. This is something that basically in North America, they basically would make money with these, which was basically, they used to call it wampum. The American Indians used it for trade. And we actually have some of it here in the restaurant. We displayed in the window downstairs. It was actually made by a local artisan. And the clam shell itself, you can see in the left with the purple, I actually have one here. If you flip on my camera here and look, you can see this is what was desired. And sometimes these shells can be completely purple inside. It's kind of a cool look there. You can see some of these clams that we have here. So it's pretty cool. So this is what they would use. And the Indians use that basically as a form of currency, as well as decorative. Next slide, please. Sometimes I get asked this question, do you find pearls in cohogs? And the answer is yes. Here's a perfect example of many different ones. The black pearl is the most rare, but you can see Anton actually has one over here that he had mounted, that he had found many years ago. And then he had to use the gold oyster. He mounted it on there. You guys can catch that. So they are basically out there. They're very rare. I've only seen one teeny weeny one here since I've been here and since we've been opening clams. Next slide, please. This is the world's largest pearl, 75 pounds, caught off the coast of the Philippines. And the story goes that this was under a fisherman's bed for about 10 years until he gave it to his sister, who then realized it had some value. So it's worth basically over $100 million. Next slide, please. And now we're getting to oysters. So oyster farming. This is the flats in Duxbury Bay, basically, that we use. Basically, one of the companies we use. I asked them to send me a picture of the summertime shot. So next slide, please. This is what basically oysters start out as. They call them spat.
Chef, this is Matt, the producer. We cannot hear you. You may have accidentally hit the mute button on your phone. Nope, don't see you. And unfortunately, that phone looks like it's offline. Hang tight, folks. This is the world of Zoom, and we are live, and tech problems do pop up from time to time.
Matt, do you have me now?
Yes, sir.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, I guess it's the Italian in me. I just can't not do stupid stuff with my hands. So what we want to show you is how they basically, oysters need to grow on oysters. So these little teeny pieces of spat you see on my hand here will basically attach to all the oysters, and that's how they'll grow. But they are really, really tiny. This is actually pretty big considering what we have.
Chef,
So
do me a favor and start
Yes.
that camera on your phone. It did restart when you had to rejoin for whatever reason. So
All right, so
just should be a start video option on there.
how about now? Did we get it?
Yeah, but it's pointing back at you like we had in rehearsal. So we need to
All right.
flip that camera around.
How about now?
Still seeing your face.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Right.
Just if
Maybe
you want
I'll-
to turn the camera around, or the phone.
Oh, maybe I'll just do this thing.
Yeah,
We're
that's fine.
on time. So we're saying this is what we're talking about, how these little guys will live on other oysters. There you go. So I'm going to let Anton basically open up a couple of oysters here to show you how easy it is. We actually use a rock. It's called the rock method. And basically what he does is he'll get into the hinge and then just wiggle that knife, cut the top off, and then he'll release the oyster. Thought you were going to get the easy ones. So the reason we use the rock had to do basically the fact that your wrist can pretty much get beat up pretty bad, especially when you open tens of thousands of oysters. So what Anton will do is basically hit that hinge and then basically crack it and then basically just go under and separate the top and the bottom. Can I get the next slide, please? So what we have here is basically, the next slide after that one. Next slide, please. Okay, after the spat, yep, next slide. So what we have is sizes. I think that'll be the next slide when it does come up. So
Yep.
here you can see we have basically different sizes. These are basically what we call cocktail. These were actually legal in Massachusetts until about 3 years ago when they became legal to sell. Then we go basically up to, actually these are really small. These are the cocktails. These are selects, and this is considered extra large, this one here. You can see it's 3 inches is the legal size that we sell. That's the length of the knife. So you can see basically by that slide, the cocktails 2.5, the selects are 3 to 3.5, extra large 4 to 5, and the super jumbos, which we don't have one here, but the super jumbos are 6.5 plus. Can you go next slide, please?
Chef, we've got you muted again.
How about now?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Thank you.
I gotta stop playing with that phone. It's dangerous. Oysters basically can clean 40 gallons of water per day. One oyster. That's an example of, they put some oysters in a tank that looked cloudy to the left. They filtered the water and you can see it was clear. Next slide, please. And I apologize for the technical difficulty, guys. That wasn't part of the show, as they say. Next slide, Jackie.
Coming right up. It's just a bit of a delay.
No problem. Thank you. All right. So, one thing about oysters is that we buy farm-raised oysters here, lots of them. And the reason we like them is because one of the things that helps them grow is they tumble them, which means that they've taken the oysters out of the ocean, put them in a tumbler, and what it does is it rounds out the edges, and it basically smooths out the edges. It makes the cup deeper, but it also makes small cracks in the sides of the oysters. So those oysters then need to be put back in the ocean and basically stay in the ocean for approximately 2 to 3 weeks to heal from those cracks that happen. If they not put it back in the ocean and they try to sell them, they dry out very quickly and they actually have flat and there's no meat left in them and they're actually almost an empty shell. So we're probably not going to go that dish. We've got only about 8 minutes left, right, Jackie? Time-wise, about 7 minutes, because I lost some time with that.
Yes, but we'll go a little long so that we can get to some of the Q&A as well.
All right, go ahead. Go to the next slide. So I'll try to push through the rest of these slides real quick. So, oysters are basically, again, the largest oyster was only 14 inches long. Basically, that was caught off the coast of Denmark. You can see the picture there with the tape measure. Next slide, please. Oyster pearls. Again, if you look in that very carefully, you can see a small pearl that was found here at the Oyster House. So pearls are definitely found in oysters, which is most common. Next. And this is just a variety of knives here that we basically use. Anton has brought in his private collection here. I'm not sure if this phone is in mode still to see it. Let me know if it is or it isn't.
Will do. It looks like it is currently off in terms of the camera. So if you hit start video.
All right. Let's see.
There we go. And it's pointing towards you. So just turn it around and point it at the knives. There we go.
If I told you it says safe driving mode, right? That's what I'm in right now. So it's good to know that I'm in a safe driving mode. That's what the phone says. So these are just some of Anton's knives he brought in just to kind of show you a little bit of what goes on. I'm going to hand you this back because you know what? I'm having trouble with that thing. So if I can get the next slide, please. I want to tell you a little bit about pearls. So this also, by the way, is some antique knives that we have at the restaurant. We actually have some restaurants that are circa 1900. And we actually have them mounted on boards down in the restaurant, and we use them basically for display and for private parties. The other thing is, how does a pearl form in an oyster? Has to do with a grain of sand. Small piece of sand gets caught inside the oyster's belly, and it can't get it out. So it extrudes a white substance around it, and the longer the oyster grows, the bigger the pearl becomes. Next slide, please. So fishing in the Northeast can be basically challenging. So these pictures are out of Gloucester Harbor for those that are local. This is what it looks like when it freezes in, but yet we're still able to get seafood. Next slide, please. So oyster farming in the winter is rather challenging too. And how they actually get the oysters, because they're under the ice, is chainsaws. The one in the bottom corner, that chainsaw is about 6 feet long. And the guys will come in and they'll literally take a chainsaw and they'll carve a hole in the ice. And then they'll go inside and dive for the oysters. Next slide, please. So here you can see a couple scuba divers who are actually diving for scallops. In this case, I'm sorry, oysters. And they're basically pulling them up. They normally bag them underneath the water and just pull up the bags. Next slide, please. And this also happens in Massachusetts, and this is a rarity, but we have frozen tides. We had a few this year for the first time since 2015, and that makes it very challenging to get hard shell clams and oysters because it's very difficult when that slush comes in. It's hard for the guys to get under it to get the stuff. Next slide, please. New England chowder versus clam chowder. I want to just let you know that we only serve New England clam chowder. Manhattan clam chowder, which has tomatoes, has never been served here. And in actuality, it was never invented in New York. It was actually invented in Rhode Island when Portuguese settled there. And basically tomatoes were abundant and cream wasn't. And that's how they created their chowder. Rhode Island's also known for a clear broth chowder. In addition to that, there actually is a state law in Maine that says it's against the law to put tomatoes in clam chowder. And that was on the books in 1939. It's still on the books today. And that's actually going to be in that Chronicle piece. We found out about that recently too. This pretty much ends the basic presentation part. If you have a few questions, Jackie, if we have time, be happy to try to answer them.
Great. Well, everything looks spectacular. And we do have some questions if you don't mind, Chef.
All right, no problem. And we did put the clam chowder up, by the way. It's right there in the front row as well.
So some of the questions that had come in via the Q&A do you have any recommended applications for scallop roe, or is it always discarded?
I haven't done much with scallop roe. Pretty much what we're working with is strictly scallops here. There are people that do use the roe, but I personally don't. I just pretty much bring them in as I just showed you. I mean, I just opened up that to kind of show you what the inside looks like. They discard 90% of that and just keep the roe and basically abduct the mussel.
Sure, great. Okay, and one of the other Q&A questions that came in live was, if there's lobsters that are different colors, does that change the selling price?
Good question. No, actually, it doesn't, but the size does. The ones we bring in are 1 1/4 pound. Price per pound for those lobsters right now are about $12 a pound. The larger 1 2-pounders, they're actually closer to $14 to $15 a pound, depending on the day. But color really doesn't dictate. Normally, we don't get many with a lot of color. They tend to keep those for themselves. The vendors sometimes will send them to museums, or fish aquariums, excuse me. And some people will taxiderm them, like that one you saw on the wall in the Union Oyster House.
Yes, that one was huge. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, one of the other questions that came in is actually from Chef Peter Wassenberg. And he has very much enjoyed the presentation, but he would like to know what's your viewpoint on smoking seafood, and if you have any favorite smoked seafood recipes.
I've only done a little bit of smoking in-house. I was doing some stovetop smoking using some, basic hickory and some cherry wood. I did that for a little bit and then kind of got away from it. It seemed like it was a lot of work for a little bit of fish I was selling. But smoked salmon is pretty much everybody's, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but it is one of my favorites. Nothing like smoked on a bagel, smoked lox on a bagel. One of my favorites, as well as a nice appetizer roll with a little bit of dillweed. Very nice.
Excellent. All right, that does sound great. Okay, and one of the other questions, I'm not sure if you're able to share, but someone was wondering how much seafood, if there's a number amount or a pound amount that you might go through per week at the Union Oyster House.
Well, oysters on the half shell, we'll sell 1 million a year just on the half shell. That's not shucked and fried. That's not stuffed. That's not grilled oysters. That's just oysters on the half shell that Anton and some of the other guys open up downstairs. In reference to clam chowder, we do about 10,000 gallons of clam chowder a year. That's enough to fill up a couple boxcars. For things like cod in the summertime, we buy between 25 and 100 pounds a day. So we'll use 300 or 400 pounds of different fish each day. Between the cod, the haddock, the salmon, the scallops. And scallops, I buy them by the bag or by the gallon, depending on the time of the year. And, we'll use, 35, 40 pounds a day on scallops. Shrimp, we use somewhere between 100 to 200 pounds a day. Just depends on time of the year. We do an average of 2,000 customers a day in the summertime.
Wow. Oh my gosh, it's astounding. And so one of the other questions that had come in was about what are some of the common mistakes that you find outside of the Union Oyster House, of course? What are some of the common mistakes that you see chefs or young cooks making when it comes to seafood preparation, and how they can avoid that?
Well, the big thing is really doing a little bit of experiment with it. When I do a big function, like I did one actually for the Les Amis Escoffier Society, and we had basically a seafood course So I brought some fish in, and I wanted to basically to make sure I have some ovens behind me, some convections. I wanted to basically roast the fish in the convection oven because it's a little quicker, and I wanted to basically be able to turn that, keep the plates on time. So I brought that fish in, and I estimated, it's going to take 6 minutes. Well, it wasn't 6; it turned into about 8. So that 2-minute difference isn't a big deal, but that means I would have been serving undercooked fish. So what we did was we tested it with basically just one piece of fish, and it was done quicker than when we filled the oven with a load. So experimenting a little bit, understanding how your equipment works, that's really important, and realizing the fish only takes 8 to 10 minutes, depending on how thick that cut is, to cook, even on a hot grill. So that's the one thing. And then also too, just making sure that you're buying your fish from a reputable person. I mean, I only buy my scallops from one guy now. I pay a premium, but I know that those scallops are going to be the way I want them. And the same with my cod, my haddock, my salmon. I buy them from specific people. I could give all the business to one guy, but his fish doesn't meet my expectations. And I want my guests to basically enjoy that fish as fresh as I can get it, and the style of fish that works for my equipment. So I've experimented with all kinds of fish from different vendors to lend on what I have right now.
Right. Well, we can certainly see and feel your dedication to quality. I know how much that means to you and to the Oyster House. One of the other questions, I know that we do have some students tuning in. So I was wondering if you might have some advice for some of the young chefs, and also what you might look for when you're hiring cooks, any sort of skill sets that they should be working on.
Well, the biggest advice I could give you is never stop learning. I mean, everybody says it sounds like, okay, well, a guy like me who's been doing this for 44 years, do you think I still learn stuff? Absolutely. I take chances. I learn things. I experiment. I constantly learn. I mean, I go to the ACF National Convention. Why do I go to it? Seminars, the education. We're doing these webinars. Why are we doing them? Education. You're never going to know it all. I don't know it all. And some of the chefs that are on here probably watching that are older than I am and more experienced than I am don't know it all. And we'll admit it right to you. So never think you know it all just because you learned something in school. Great. I went to school too, and I'm still learning. I mean, I would be able to become certified. I had to get more education. So what do I look for? Someone, I'm hiring someone? Basically, dedication. Are they dedicated to the industry? Well, have they basically...
Chef, we lost you right there, unfortunately. We'll need to check that phone again. Chef, can you hear me? Hi, Chef, this is Matt.
It just shows me that the time that I'm going to put in to teach you from the restaurant will be valuable enough that you want to learn it and take it on and share it with someone else. Because if you work under a mentoring chef, is what I would try to tell you. If you go to work on a job and you're not learning anything there and it's just a job, it's not a career. If you can go and work for a chef that basically likes to share his information or her information, that doesn't mind getting their hands dirty with you right there and showing you the proper technique on how to do something over and over again till you get it, that's the kind of chef you want to work for. Because in the end, You can't learn unless you do it. Everybody learns differently. Like some people could just look at it once, got it cold. Some people have to use their hands and their eyes, got it cold. And some people just can't get it until they do it 100,000 times. But you got to be patient enough. And if you're working for a patient chef, you can basically learn an awful lot.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. We'll take just a few more questions. A couple of these are culinary questions. One of the chefs who's tuning in, who I also know is originally from Boston, but he's been down in Florida as long as I have, is wondering what type of potato that you recommend for the chowder.
We use Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
Classic Idaho potatoes are the best for the chowder. Basically, we even use those for our mashed potatoes. We don't buy any other potatoes. I find Idaho the premiumest for potatoes, basically with just butter, milk, salt, pepper, and just boil the potatoes, and it just makes a really nice mashed potato. Same thing with the chowder. The starch in that potato helps stick in that chowder a bit, and it's just a really consistent potato. The only thing that you have is sometimes you have potato blight. I think that's how you say it. In the center with those black spots or sometimes a growth. But when we're cutting them up, we see that and we just discard that. But we find that that's the best potato for us. It really works well for Union Oyster House.
Okay, great. Well, the next culinary related question, I'm not sure if you want to take this or even if Chef Anton wanted to, but they're asking what the major differences might be between Pacific and Atlantic oysters.
Yeah. You want to talk on that one, Chef? No? He says, no? Okay. Well, the difference is it's a different species altogether. First off, the size of the oyster is also different. Kumamoto's, which is basically a West Coast or oyster that you find there, is different than ours. Ours basically tend to be bigger, meatier. They have more mineral flavor, a little more saltiness, a little more brininess, we call it here. I have eaten, oysters on the West Coast. I know Taylor Oyster's huge out there. Their oysters are just much smaller, and they're just not as meaty, not as flavorful, at least, on mine. And a lot of the product I buy here are farm raised versus wild. The guys like the farm raised better for the consistency of the shell, the ease to open them. Wild oysters tend to have bent and curved shells, which tend to crack when you're opening them up. The flavor profile can be better or different, but it really depends on what the oyster has been eating and growing in. Oyster can grow almost an inch over the summer, but it takes about 3 years for it to get to market. So it has a long time to eat and grow, and it changes the flavor with the algae and everything else that's in the water.
All right. Well, here we have a question coming in from Maine, and actually from Chef Barrio.
I knew he was going to do that to me. Hi, Chef. How you doing?
And Chef was wondering if you might be able to share what the net meat yield is for a 1 1/4 pound lobster.
Yeah, he's going to test me because, Chef Barrio is an expert. He actually used to teach lobster classes, and he's taught a tremendous amount of students. He's a fantastic chef and a great colleague and friend, and also a fellow of the Academy and the honor of all to go toque. So, Chef, when we shuck, we get between 3.5, maybe 4 ounces. It depends on the year, the time of the year, because the lobsters will obviously, as you know, shed, which means they'll back out of their shell. And when they back out of their shell, there's not as much meat there because they've used a lot of their energy to do that, and they've stressed out. So then they'll fill the shell back up as time goes on, as they feed. So we find between 3 ounces for a 1 pound lobster, 3.5 to 4 when they get to about 1 1/4.
All right. There.
I hope I pass the test, Chef. We'll see. He's going to text me in a second. Watch, the phone's going to go out.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll leave it to your final thoughts before we wrap up.
Okay.
And I know we're going a little bit long, but we wanted to make sure that we
I
gave
appreciate
everyone
that.
the opportunity. One of the viewers has asked, in working in such a historic restaurant, how do you balance the responsibility to maintain history and tradition with the drive to innovate or modernize recipes?
That's an excellent question, honestly, and I have been asked that a few times. Right now, I feel I'm a caretaker of the menu. We have a menu on the wall downstairs that was put up on the wall, and it's from 1850. And if you look at that menu, we still today serve 40% of the original menu from this restaurant open. We serve the clams, we serve the scallops, we serve the frying clams, and so on. So those items are there, and they're staples of what made this restaurant famous. This restaurant's been around 195 years. I've only been here for 8. And the food that they've served and the style they serve is what people have been coming to this restaurant for. So all really as a chef when you come here is you can look at the ingredients and see if you can make it better by not necessarily changing the recipe, but by maybe changing slightly the technique that's been used. Because if you think about it, the restaurant didn't start with gas or electricity, it was candlelight, coal, wood. So now we've moved into induction cooking. We've moved in basically to deep frying. All these different ways of cooking have changed the way the restaurant's presented its food. And for me, the biggest change was trans fats. Because when the trans fats were pulled out, we had to rework some of the baked good products that we have in-house, as well as a few recipes that we had and ingredients that we were buying. So that was an opportunity to kind of retool some of the items on the menu. But any chef that comes here and thinks that they're going to basically turn this into a gourmet restaurant is coming to the wrong restaurant. You're coming here basically to show your skills at seafood, handling, purchasing, running a staff. This building's made with 3 kitchens, 550 seats, and thousands of customers from around the world who have different palates. And our goal is to really teach them with their palate what New England seafood's all about. And that's what we do here, the classics in seafood, as well as we have some specialty section, but it's just a little bit of 4 items that we usually sell that gives the chef a chance to show some of his skills. And that's how the menu sets up here.
I love the keeping with the traditions, the caretaker of the traditions. I love it. Anything else that you'd like to share with the viewers about your presentation or about the restaurant, Chef?
Well, the thing is, again, I apologize for the glitches again, but this is live. And if we were here sitting in my kitchen, or if we were basically at a conference or something, those glitches wouldn't happen. So I apologize for those. But again, it just shows that we're all human. We make mistakes. We got to move on. Live TV doesn't stop. I will say this emblem on my jacket on this side here, left and right, I'm looking at a different screen than you see. Well, we got the Academy over here, which is next to my heart. I'm the chairman. I'm extremely honored and proud to represent it. What does it mean? Well, it's an honor society, as we say, but it is something that everybody should try to emulate to become. It's basically only 800 chefs in the country have the distinction of wearing this logo here. Oh, sorry. This logo here. So crazy this is. I'm looking backwards at myself, reverse screen. This logo here. And it takes many years to get there, but it's not insurmountable. Just start thinking about it early in your career. And when you get to about 35, maybe 40 years old, you'll be there. The American Culinary Federation, on the other hand, great resource, great basically group to belong to. When I first started in the 70s, I wanted to meet chefs, and there was no really avenue to meet chefs at the time. So I started competing, and that's how I met some of my best friends. Mickey Berrio, who's actually Will Berrio's brother, he and I became great friends through culinary competitions, and we're still friends today. We're talking 44 years later. That's part of what it can do. The networking piece, the education piece, that's what the ACF can do for you. And the academy, part of the academy is to give back. We give out scholarships to culinary students. That's one of our biggest things. When asked to do things like this, we step up and say yes, and we do them. We give back, we share our knowledge. That's really what we want to do. I've been doing this for so many years, and I'm so happy to do this. And Jackie, I'm so happy you asked me to do this. And really kudos to Jackie and the staff at the ACF, because without them, this wouldn't happen. This would be even more flubbed up than I already did, because I have done a few Zooms on my own, and it's been kind of shaky, to be honest with you. So I really appreciate the support from Matt, actually, as well. And I know that Michelle's in the background and a few others, and I know Karen, who runs the academies here as well. So thank you all.
Well, thank you.
And also, I should thank my friend Anton for being here as well. So thank you, Anton.
Thank you. A huge virtual round of applause as we thank Chef DiFronzo and Chef Anton for sharing their time and their knowledge today. We appreciate it very, very much. And we know that many more will also be tuning in to watch this recording. I wish I was there to taste those delicious dishes. Certainly making me miss home, but I love that we have you there, keeping the traditions going strong. So
well, you can say you're always invited up here. Well, next time you're in Boston, make sure you let me know you're in town. Take care of you.
Well, I will be there. And anyone else who's tuning in too, who hasn't been to the city of Boston recently, make sure that you put it on your after COVID travel plans to get up there and visit the Union Oyster House. We can't thank you enough. And we hope to see you at our next webinar We will be back on April 7th for a plant-based cuisine for healthcare and senior dining, presented in collaboration with the Association of Nutrition and Food Service Professionals. So please go to wearechefs.com to search webinars and register for any of our upcoming events. So on behalf of the American Culinary Federation and the ACF National Office, thank you again to the chefs and presenters today. Thank you to the Union Oyster House. And thank you to the Massachusetts Restaurant Association Educational Foundation and Mass ProStart for being with us as well. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.